I do not know about those. I think that Mr. Kelly said he will speak to them.
I understand.
Go ahead, Peter. Would you like to speak to that?
Mr. Kelly, it's good to see you. Please have a seat and just identify yourself for the record.
My apologies for this unorthodox way of
You're more than welcome here, Mr. Kelly.
of appearing here today. It's a natural question to ask, you know, how is it that that priest, Stephen Foley, was at the seminary on a stipend and I guess allowed to drive a car that he owned himself or he had himself from some prior circumstance. And Nancy actually asked about that yesterday, and we went through a brief discussion of what transpired. After you left, I actually had a long discussion with Archbishop Mansell because I had the same question. And we actually went to, and I know this is not an area of law that we concern ourselves with, but we went to canon law. We actually looked at the canon law. And strangely enough, there is a very specific requirement that a priest, until a priest is completely laified, meaning defrocked, removed from the priesthood, there is a specific responsibility to provide financial sustenance, housing, food, and the care, and that is an obligation of the church. There is a process to go through laification, which is actual removal of the priesthood from any indices of the role of a priest. That happens to be a very strenuous, almost impossible circumstance if it's objected to by the subject of the laification. In this case, when we went through this most recent publication of a 1993 event, the church learned, the church meaning the Archbishop, the Archdiocese of Hartford learned for the first time that he'd been holding himself out continually as a chaplain, although he wasn't a chaplain anymore, that he had obtained a car under the auspices of an official association of fire chiefs, and that somehow he had taken possession of the car or owned the car. We don't know the answer to that, although his relationship with that association was completely ended. And so now the priest is removed from the facility. He's actually seeking housing on his own, probably not in the state, and that is basically the Archdiocese at that point suggested it would be best for all for him to do that. So anyway, the short answer to the question is, why would you give assistance to a priest in the circumstance? And the answer is their own canon law requires them so to do.
Well, actually, Attorney Kelly, that's not my question, because I'm a big believer in making sure that people are able to live and have a place to eat, have something to eat and have a place to live, regardless of what crime they committed.
Sure.
My issue is about supervision, and he was living on the property, and he didn't recently buy that car, from what I understand. It was 7 years ago, and that's the time when it was equipped fully with police equipment, including wigwag lights and antenna and other things of that nature.
Grill lights.
Grill lights, correct. And that being the case, my question is not, I don't begrudge anyone from providing sustenance to any offender. But with that comes an obligation to exercise supervision. And in this particular case, given Mr. Foley's track record, it seems to me there's no question in my mind or anybody else's mind that he is in fact a child molester who cannot control himself and has been doing this for more than 40 years. But it seems as though there was absolutely no attempt to constrain his activity or his whereabouts or his associations that I'm aware of, and nothing that's been said today changes that. And so this is only relevant in today's discussion because in the prepared statement, reference was made to our safe environment programs for children. And my question to you is, that being the case, how could this be permitted for so long when it was happening right under the eyes of all places, at the St. Thomas Seminary, where there are so many people living and so many people working and so many people watching? How is it possible?
Fortunately, they're all adults at St. Thomas Seminary as we have it occupied today. But in all events, I can't speak to what level of supervision Father Foley went under, except to say that one of the responses to the basic demand that he be removed was that there is a negative to that, and that is he would not be under supervision. I can't say to you, because I don't know the answer, what the level of supervision was, whether in fact there was any, and whether there were any episodes of concern. I can't answer that, because I just don't know the answer, but I'll find the answer.
Those are my questions.
No, I understand.
I think it's
That's a
better
good
that he
question,
lives
and-
somewhere and that somebody is watching him, and so if it's a seminary, fine. The question is supervision. And I just point out, also in your written testimony, you made reference to training people on the early warning signs of abuse.
Yes.
And how to make a report so that the abuse is prevented. And not that I'm an expert, but I know a fair amount about this topic, and I can't imagine there could be any more warning signs than those that were demonstrated by Mr. Foley. I mean, he is a classic poster child for a child molester, continuing to engage in his grooming behavior. He is a textbook example of exactly what we're talking about. And to not recognize that and to permit it to go on for so long and to wait for it to be unveiled in the newspaper of all places by investigative reporters, it seems to me that the program you referred to has to be adjusted and has to be updated, and your efforts need to be redoubled.
Do you care to respond?
No,
It wasn't a
You're
question. You don't need to respond, but if
Well-
you want to, you have the right.
again, I can speak to what we do now. I can speak to what the Safe Environment Program is. I can speak to the fact that if there are any, and remember that this goes back, these allegations of abuse go back many, many years. People think it's a present crisis, but it's not. And there's a zero tolerance for that kind of for behavior. That's
Thank you.